Vision time this evening. Now, later than scheduled, we proceed to Leaders' Questions under Standing Order 36. Deputy Mary Lou McDonald, please.
Taoiseach, the cost of living is putting enormous pressure on households. A report by Bernardo's this morning highlights the sharp impact on families and children. Nearly half of parents say that they or their children have gone without or have cut back on the basics over the last 6 months. This includes food, clothes, medicine, electricity and heat. 47% of parents say they're forced to cut back on social activities for their kids. The vast majority of those surveyed say that they worry about not being able to provide the daily essentials for their children. These are the stories that I am hearing back from families as I canvass around the country. Speaking on radio this morning, Bernardo's CEO Suzanne Connolly captured, I think, the real stress and worry for parents, saying, "Can you imagine what it's like living in a household where you're having to make those types of choices about whether to have the heating on or to have variety in your diet in terms of food? Can you imagine what it's like for parents having to say to children, we can't do what your friends are doing, we can't afford it?" Well, that's the reality for so many. For so many workers and families, the cost of living has never been higher and getting by has never been more difficult than under this government. People are paying hand over fist for sky-high energy bills, housing costs, food, insurance, everything, while they see big super-rich companies make record profits and a government standing idly by allowing rip-offs to happen. People who work very hard to provide for their families are being squeezed every single day. Having failed to tackle the cost of living crisis, you now talk a big game 9 days out from an election. But you sat at Cabinet table as the government chose not to introduce permanent supports for struggling families, supports that would have made a long-term difference. You were there as government chose not to increase the core rate of child benefit, chose not to increase qualified child payments to the levels needed. And last month, you chose to increase the price of petrol and diesel, and you propose to do so twice more once these elections have passed. So, despite your stated concern, and instead of making every effort to reduce costs for households, you're proposing to increase them. So you will forgive many for not believing your big talk on the eve of an election. Tá Ger came an costas marachtála fósa cur brú ulwar Healy-Rae. Tá an Taoiseach a caintear cluiche mór ní lá amui ón Aodhan. Ní mór in isise ag fáil ré leis na hardathe petrol agus diesel atá planáilte. Taoiseach, if you are concerned genuinely about struggling families, why would you make them struggle more? You must know that raising the cost of petrol and diesel again and again will hurt these families, so don't do it. If you are serious about really tackling the cost of living, start by scrapping your plan to hike the price of petrol and diesel in August and in October.
Deputy Taoiseach.
Well, thanks very much, Ceann Comhairle, and I very much welcome the opportunity to have the opportunity today to discuss the important issues highlighted by the Bernardo's survey, which they've published this morning. And I'm very grateful to Bernardo's for the work that they do. I'm very grateful for the survey that they've produced. And I want to thank their dedicated staff and volunteers right across the country. Objectively, Ireland is making progress when it comes to child poverty. The consistent poverty rate for children is now lower than it has been at any other time since it started to be measured in Ireland in 2004. Similarly, the at-risk of poverty rate for children is also now lower than it has ever been at any time since we started measuring it in 2004. And the data also shows the positive impact on child poverty rates of the cost of living measures in the previous government. And the Bernardo's report today has 12 indicators. And of those 12 indicators on page 2 of their statement this morning, 8 of those indicators have shown very significant progress over the course of the last year. That's why I've said already this week at the National Economic Dialogue that cost of living supports must be a focus of the next budget also. It's also why we held the first Child Poverty and Wellbeing Summit in Dublin Castle just last week. It had more than 300 participants, including Bernardo's, to say, what next? What next do we do in Ireland? Because we don't want any child in Ireland to be hungry. We don't want any family in Ireland to struggle. So how do we work together on both universal supports and also on more targeted measures? And I must say, Deputy, by any fair analysis, we've taken a number of measures that have made a very positive difference to families already, whether that's reducing the cost of childcare, whether it's increasing parents' leave, parents' benefit, whether it's providing free school books to all children in primary school, whether it's providing an expansion of the hot school meals and making sure that we have hot school meals for all primary school children in 2025, whether it's providing access to free GP care for children, or whether it's a really important initiative we took in government only last week called the Equal Start, an initiative that was described by the Children's Rights Alliance as one of the most important measures you could take if you were serious about tackling child poverty. This is a new government-funded model to ensure that there's extra supports for disadvantaged children in early learning and childcare. And of course, there is much more that we want to do, both on the universal side and on the targeted side as well. But you referenced the issue specifically in relation to fuel. And here's where I think there's a number of inconsistencies in your approach. Firstly, you travel the globe, Massachusetts most recently, talking to the next generation about the importance of climate change. And yet you come in here and at every single opportunity, and I think many in the opposition would agree with me on this, every single opportunity you have to show leadership on climate, you refuse to take. You oppose every single measure that's put forward whilst telling young people across the globe that you want to address the climate emergency. But more hypocritically, perhaps, is your position in relation to petrol and diesel. Because you're misleading people again. To the men and women at home, to the men and women driving to work, driving from work, collecting children from school later today, I want them to know that while the government keeps future rises under review, including the August one, in the Sinn Féin alternative budget, you propose restoring all of the carbon tax by the month of April. So stop trying to cod people. The people aren't thick. They can see through this single gear that you have. Faux outrage, shout and roar, rah, 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 stick a video up on Twitter. But actually, when push came to shove, when the decision point, when you to present your alternative budget to this House, here's what it said. Extend the reduced rate of excess duty for petrol and diesel to April, not August.
McDonald.
So the report makes absolutely clear that half of households, parents and children, struggle, go without and worry. That's the upshot of the Barnardo's report. Actually, it's an echo of Social Justice Ireland, which equally recorded those stresses and strains, and that's the reality. And insulting me, Taoiseach, doesn't take from that reality. So I have put it to you. You have made and stated your intention that you wish to tackle the cost of living. You've made quite a production around this. That's good. You should do that. I am saying to you that hiking diesel and petrol prices in August and then again in October will not achieve that aim. In fact, on the contrary, it will make a difficult situation far more difficult, particularly for families that live in rural and isolated communities, other families who must rely on their car for all sorts of reasons. So why would you do this? I'm asking you to put your money where your mouth is. If you believe that you will tackle the cost of living, start by scrapping and being explicit that there will be no hike in diesel and petrol costs in August or in October. It's that simple, Taoiseach.
Yeah, look, don't be a sensitive soul. When I just talk about holding you to account for what you said, it's not insulting you. I'd never insult you. I have great respect for you as a person, but this is what you said in relation to the budget. That's what you said. I can only judge you on the figures you produce, and so can the Irish people. We, as a government, and I want motorists to know this, we keep this under review, and we have great form in relation to this, Deputy. Reversals in relation to reductions that were due to come into place as far back as August 2022 have been rolled over. We're keeping it under review, and we will make those decisions and continue to keep it under review. But I'm pleased you referenced the issue of child poverty today as well, because child poverty is a really important issue, and we need to do more. But let's look at our record versus yours. In the last budget, we extended child benefit, benefiting 60,000 more children. You didn't wish to benefit one extra. We put 45 million more into hot school meals. You put a paltry 15 million in. We increased the domiciliary care allowance. You didn't think those parents deserved any more. We provided a lump sum payment for families on qualified child payment. You didn't. And we increased the income threshold for the working families. You didn't as well. And in Northern Ireland, where you're now leading the government longer than I'm leading this government, you don't yet have a strategy to tackle child poverty. Read this from the Northern Ireland Audit Office. When is the Sinn Féin First Minister going to deliver a child poverty strategy in Northern Ireland?
On behalf of the Labour Party, Deputy Aodhan.
Taoiseach, I was privileged on Monday to visit the Sale Hub.
Can we have a little order, please?
I want to talk about disabilities, if people would give me the opportunity. I was privileged on Monday, Taoiseach, to visit the Sale Hub in Ballyfermot, Community Civic Centre run by Stewart Care, with our local Labour representative Patrick Dempsey. And we heard firsthand the challenges facing young adults with disabilities, the under-resourcing, the lack of opportunities. And as you know, disabled people are at a much higher risk of poverty and social exclusion. They're more likely to be out of work and to leave education early. In 2015, I was proud to be involved in the creation of the Comprehensive Employment Strategy for people with disabilities. Yet nearly 10 years on, Ireland still has the highest disability employment gap in the EU, at nearly twice the European average. There are many reasons for this, but a failure to support people to overcome barriers is fundamental to Ireland's poor outcomes. There is still no recognition of the cost of a disability, and if a person takes up work, they may lose their medical card. But for many parents, they can't even think about future employment when they're swamped with the difficulties of accessing services and supports for their children. I know when you became Taoiseach, you said disability will be one of your priorities, and we welcomed that. And you will know that this is a burning issue for many families. The huge delays in assessment of needs for children, with nearly 15,000 children on waiting lists. The lack of supports for young adults when they leave the education system. Huge disquiet about the resourcing of additional complex needs in schools, and the chronic failure to ensure access to occupational therapists, speech and language therapists, psychologists, and so on. A few weeks ago, we had a national discussion about the rights of disabled people, Taoiseach, yet it has fallen off the political radar again. It's the last week of May, and no allocations have been released yet for special needs assistance. It shows enormous disrespect for educational staff. Principals of special schools have highlighted the need for therapists to be in their schools rather than allocated to HSE's Children's Disability Network teams. This mistake, introduced 6 years ago, is now being reversed, but there are huge barriers to recruitment because they weren't being offered permanent contracts. Now the Minister has to go deeper to get sanctioned for what should have been obvious in the first place. There was no consultation with disability organisations about the removal of complex needs criteria from the allocation of special educational teachers. Yesterday, the Minister had to admit there will have to be an additional 1,000 special education teacher hours for allocation. Schools are being forced to go to the NCSE to fill the gap when they don't have alternative supports. And as Inclusion Ireland have said, all policy should be rights-proofed and child-centred, and this needs to be revisited. So, Taoiseach, the questions I have for you nearly 2 months into your term are this, and you might allow me, I can't quote seeing as I was interrupted at the beginning. What has been done to address the cost of disability, and will there be a new comprehensive employment strategy for people with disabilities? Will you consult with disability organisations and reverse the removal of complex needs hours from schools? And will you guarantee every child will have a place in September? And finally, Taoiseach, when will allocations for SNAs be made? It's getting later and later every year.
Taoiseach.
I want to thank Deputy Aodhan for raising the important matter and acknowledge the work of SAIL, and I'd be very happy to engage with that organisation. A couple of issues here, and I'd like to try and address each of them. In relation to comprehensive employment and the need to do more for people with a disability to access the workforce, I must acknowledge it's a former colleague of yours, Fergus Finlay, and others who set up the Trinity Centre for People with Intellectual Disabilities. Quite inspiring what they've done there, because it's not just access to education, but crucially the access to the employment after. I am pleased to inform the Deputy that from September, that model, or a very similar model, will be rolled out to around a dozen more higher education complexes and institutions across the country. I do think that link between education and employment opportunities is important, and we can learn much from the Trinity Centre. There is a funding allocation for that as well. In relation to assessment of needs, I'm not happy where we are in relation to this, neither is Minister Rabbitte or Minister Naughton. That's why last week we announced an extra €12 million to try and address the backlog in families waiting for an assessment of need. Many families are waiting far too long. I am pleased that will use, and again I acknowledge your constructive role in the Labour Party in relation to this, the idea of using private capacity in the short term to try and help address some of that backlog, which I think arose from a motion you may have tabled. We are seeing a recruitment campaign now underway for the for the Children's Disability Network teams. From my memory, about 161 people have now been offered jobs in those teams as a result of that recruitment campaign. Phase 2 of that campaign is due to commence later this year. In relation to the special education teaching hours, you are right. Minister Naughton reminds me this morning, as a result of a review, there is about 1,000 additional hours that will be announced in the coming days. I do think there's learnings in terms of this model and the lack of consultation and engagement perhaps that the department should reflect on. I'm pleased now that the review is showing that some of the concerns that had been highlighted are now being addressed. Yes, Minister Naughton is working intensively with the Minister for Education in terms of ensuring every child with a disability will have access to an appropriate school place this September. We also want to see, and we're working to put the 39 therapy posts that the National Council for Special Education now has sanctioned for on a permanent basis. In terms of a new comprehensive employment strategy for people with disabilities, that will be considered as part of the new National Disability Strategy. There's due to be a very significant engagement with stakeholders on that later this week, I think on Friday. And I've now decided to personally chair a Cabinet Committee on Disability. It's met twice in my 7 weeks in office. It will continue to meet monthly, and that is to try and break down silos and bring people together. I accept, I can quote off statistics in relation to extra investment, all that kind of misses the point. I accept there are still very, very many challenges in terms of the delivery of services here, and I do hope some of these measures will provide some hope to people and some positive momentum.
Well, you've accepted some of the failures. I wouldn't put it at the role of, just at the feet of the department minister, as Taoiseach I should say, because the minister stood here and said that 33% of schools would have a disadvantage in their allocation of hours under the model that was suggested, and there wasn't adequate consultation. But you're working to correct that. Just on the rates of people with disabilities in employment, Taoiseach, if you are a person with disability, you're more likely to be at risk of poverty, you're more likely to be socially excluded, you're more likely to fall into addiction. Our rate of people with disabilities in the employment force is 32%. The European average is 51%. So I think it should be a government priority to relaunch or to initiate again the comprehensive employment strategy for people with disabilities, because it is, as a Labour Party, we understand absolutely the power and dignity of being in work and how important that is. So if it's 32% here and 51% in most European countries, we obviously have a huge amount of work to do, and the danger is of more people with disabilities will fall out of mainstream society and not feel as empowered or as loved or as cherished as they should be.
Deputy.
Yeah, look, I think there's sometimes a difference in classification of disability across the EU, but that doesn't take from the broader point that you actually make, that our participation rates in terms of people with a disability in the workforce aren't where they need to be. At a time of full employment, we do need to address areas of underemployment, where there are people with a disability who would like to access the workforce, employers who need people in the workforce, and I think your suggestions are sensible. I do think the approach that we're taking, though, in terms of the linkage between the educational opportunity and the employment opportunity is important. I think the career guidance strategy review that I published in my last role with the Minister for Education, that talks about putting career guidance supports into special educational schools, has to be a priority, will be a personal priority of mine for the next budget. I think also, just in terms of education in general and some of the points you made around access to places, Minister Naughton intends to increase the number of CNOs, the people organising services on the ground and organising education, from 73 to 120. I think that's a very important support for parents and for teachers. We're happy to continue to constructively engage with any suggestions in this area.
Thank you very much, Taoiseach. On behalf of the regional group, Deputy Michael Lowry.
Taoiseach, could I raise with you the issue of community cancer support centres? A diagnosis of cancer can bring with it a myriad of changes. Life can suddenly become a roller coaster of medical appointments and hospital stays, being unable to work, financial worries, a loss of independence, unintended isolation, and a tsunami of fear and uncertainty. These all-consuming changes come at a time when a person is already feeling vulnerable, worried, and sometimes even angry. Their world and that of their families and loved ones becomes plagued with questions and concerns. In the midst of these changes, patients and those close to them can become overwhelmed. Their minds are flooded with worries and fears. that they often feel unable to discuss with each other. Questions that need answers go unspoken. Worries stay silent for fear of magnifying this worry in others. Individually and collectively, they are crying out for support. They simply want someone who will listen and hear their fears, someone who can guide them along the unfamiliar path they find themselves on and walk with them when times are tough or overwhelming. Medical professionals cannot adequately offer this support. Demands on their time do not allow them for it. For more than 30 years, community cancer support centres have been providing this invaluable and vital service in many locations across the country. These centres are partnered with and recognised by the Irish Cancer Society for the instrumental role that they play in the lives of patients, their carers and families. The National Cancer Strategy identifies community cancer support centres as a key service for cancer patients. They provide psychological, emotional, educational and practical support in a warm and welcoming environment to people with cancer and those who care for them. Their services are confidential, they're professional and caring, and are provided free of charge. They offer a supportive role during and after a journey with cancer. They spend quality and precious time with all those in a family who have been impacted by their loved one's cancer diagnosis. It would be impossible to estimate the magnitude of the role they play. Yet despite this, community cancer support centres have operated as registered charities since their inception and relied solely on fundraising. They received no designated funding until this year, when they were awarded $3 million in a one-off fund from the Department of Health to support the 16 centres they operate across the country, including Shorehaven and Thurles, North Tip Hospice, Roscrea Outreach Centre and the Friends of Cancer Support Centre in Tiptown. This funding has allowed them to sustain and increase the incalculable role that they play. However, the demand and the proven need for community cancer support centres will not end in 2024. One-off funding cannot sustain the demand for such a service. So, Taoiseach, what I'm asking is, the community cancer support services have more than proven their worth. Will your government support their call for annual funding to enable this service to continue its crucial work?
Well, thanks very much, Ceann Comhairle. I want to thank Deputy Lowry for raising this really important matter. And I must say, as you started speaking, I was reminded of a delegation you brought to see me many years ago when I was the Minister for Health in relation to the Circle of Friends group in Tiptown. And you'll remember at that time the late great Sarah Gleeson came to see me with Jennifer Jones-Hickey and others. And I think of Sarah and her family today and an incredible contribution and legacy she's made to cancer services and to Circle of Friends in Tipperary Town, and Jennifer and others, and I thank them. I remember visiting the Circle of Friends and Sarah being too ill to attend, but in her memory I know we were all able to work to provide very significant funding with the community and government to deliver that state-of-the-art centre, and I was just reminded of those meetings as we're talking here today. But you are right. I mean, the role of community cancer support centres, there isn't a deputy in this House, regardless of party affiliation, that doesn't know the incredible benefit of them, and I am really pleased that the National Cancer Strategy, the current one, runs from 2017 to 2026, that it recognises that important role. There's stuff that the state must do, and the stuff that the state does well and stuff that the state must do better. But alongside that, there is that partnership approach with the voluntary centres as well. And we're now seeing more people living after a cancer diagnosis in Ireland, and therefore the supports of our community cancer centres are growing in importance. As you rightly say, they're voluntary organisations. Many of them are legally charity organisations as well. They deliver a range of services directly to cancer patients, also to their families and to their carers. And this emphasises the importance of and facilitates improved quality of life during and after cancer treatment. The services are free of charge. They're delivered in a community setting, a non-hospital setting. So this idea that I am not just a patient, but I am a person, and I'm able to access services that look at the whole of my well-being in the community is really important. So the National Cancer Control Programme did establish in 2022 an alliance of community cancer support centres, and it's now working closely with these centres on the psycho-oncology model of care and its implementation. I am pleased to say that an additional €3 million in funding was allocated to the community cancer support centres in the last budget, and this funding will help these voluntary and charity organisations to deliver services directly to cancer patients and their families. Centres that were full members of the Alliance were invited to submit applications for that funding this year. And the National Cancer Control Programme advises that letters with funding amounts for 2024 have now issued to all of the centres, and grant agreements are currently being signed off. I believe that those grants are due to start to be paid this week, and that grant payments for all of those who have received funding through the Alliance centres will be completed in early June. As we move towards Budget 2025, I want to see how we can put that funding on a sustainable footing.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Lowry.
Thank you, Taoiseach. The most important element of this is the $3 million was very welcome, and it sustains those organisations throughout this year. Their difficulty is that they can't plan ahead and they need an annual budget. So I'm asking you to ensure that an additional $3 million, or whatever the figure is included in the budget of that will be obviously at the end of this year for next year, for the year 2025. And 42,000 people are estimated to have cancer in Ireland every year, and the good news is that more people in Ireland are surviving cancer than ever before. Investment and support under the 2 national cancer strategies have helped significantly in improving outcomes. However, Taoiseach, this has declined somewhat due to what has been a reduced investment and a funding priority in the 2017-2026 strategy that you've just referred to. So I'm asking you, Taoiseach, to address that and ensure that adequate and proper funding is put in place to keep these organisations doing the tremendous work that they're doing.
Thank you, Deputy Lowry. Taoiseach.
Yeah, thanks very much to Deputy Lowry. And as you'll appreciate, the $3 million was the first time we'd provided, I suppose, this model of funding into the Alliance. And as you say, and I've met many of these organisations, I know many in my own county, I've met a number across the country, it was welcomed as an important step. I accept it's a first step. I accept they want to have an ability to be able to plan beyond year to year, or beyond having to apply on a recurring basis. And let's now see how we can make that happen in terms of the delivery of the health budget for 2025. The level of investment is very small compared to the level of community investment, and I don't think it's too much of an ask of the communities who raise so much that we would provide a greater level of certainty of funding for the years ahead. And I'm certainly happy to work with you and any like-minded deputy on this in advance of Budget 2025.
Michael Healy-Rae on behalf of the Rural Independent Group.
Thank you very much, Count Caller. And Taoiseach, I want to raise the issue of road safety schemes in County Kerry. Over a long period of time, Councillor Jackie Healy-Rae in the Castle Island electoral area has been raising this very important issue. In 2024, Kerry County Council and our excellent Director of Roads and Transportation, Frank Hartnett, has only received €550,000 to progress road safety schemes in the entire county, an increase of just €7,000 on 2023. In one municipal district in Kerry that stretches from Scotteglen back to the west of Dingle, the Castle Island Corcaguine MD, they will only be able to progress one safety scheme this year due to this allocation. Kerry County Council requires €30,000, a small sum of money, to progress a safety scheme at Lisheen Cross in Gneevgulle, where there is an extensive accident history. Recently, there was another major accident at this junction involving 5 people, and it is only a matter of time before someone is killed at that location. That project is shovel-ready but starved of funding. €60,000 is required to progress a safety scheme in Castle Island Town at the junction of the Church Street and Main Street. An extremely busy mart is located down this road and is heavily trafficked. Other schemes requiring funding: traffic calming measures and a pedestrian crossing at an extremely busy creche facility in Foyeries, along with further traffic measures in Foyeries Village, where there is a big residential development, and a recent traffic survey found that cars are going in excess of the speed limit there. The junction at the very busy Gortaclay Mart, which provides a great service on the N21, requires a right-turning ghost lane to facilitate traffic turning right. The TII in their infinite wisdom, burnt off the markings on that road a number of years ago. Another right turning ghost lane is required further up at the Glounsharoon viewing area on the N21, where we have had multiple fatalities along that road. The point I'm trying to make here today, Taoiseach, is you, and rightly so, and your government, rightly so, are concerned about traffic safety on our roads. You are continuously looking at different ways, and I don't disagree with you looking at it. But you're looking at certain issues. You're looking at drivers' behaviour. You're saying that the speed limit should be reduced from 100 to 80, 80 to 60, and 60 to 40. I don't agree with that. I would never vote for it, and I will tell you why. And I've no monopoly on being right inside in this house, and I'm not waving my hand at you and saying you're wrong. Your heart is in the right place. But I'm saying that what I would call simplistic political reactionary actions like that aren't what is required. What is required is to fund us, for instance, in County Kerry and every other county in the country. Every other deputy here has the same issues. They could stand up and name crosses and junctions and locations. Why aren't you seeing after those accident locations where people are being injured? People are putting themselves in danger. And I'm asking you here today, look at the bigger picture. Look at the deer that are roaming onto our roads. Look at the fact that local authorities are not cutting hedges and keeping trees back to give us sight distance on our road. And to look at the bigger picture. That's what I'm asking you to do. And I'm asking government, when it comes to road safety and the RSA, to not just be looking at the one thing all the time, penalty points and road drivers' behaviour. Look at our responsibility. It is our fault, all of our faults, that we're not spending money at those locations. Right. And I'm not blaming you, I'm blaming all of us. We should be doing more to help people on the ground.
Taoiseach, please.
Thanks, John Corla. I want to thank Deputy Michael Healy-Rae for raising this matter. And at the outset, as we approach another bank holiday weekend, I'm sure everyone in this House will join in calling for people to be very conscious of driver behaviour on the roads this weekend. And I'll get to the Deputy's direct point in a moment because, well, let me actually get to it now because I agree with him to a point. So what I definitely agree with is that it isn't down to any one thing. That if we're extraordinarily serious about road safety, about reversing the worrying, very worrying trends that we've seen in deaths and injuries on Irish roads this year, that we do need to look at every lever at our disposal, at everything that we can possibly do. And I'll come back to that in a moment. But what we do also know, and I'm sure the Deputy won't disagree with me on this, is that driver behaviour, or what the RSA will call killer behaviours, does account for a very, very significant majority of deaths and accidents on Irish roads. And we do need to be very conscious of that. Speed kills, drink driving kills, drug driving kills, the importance of wearing a seatbelt, the basic things that we have been trying to ingrain in Irish culture and psyche for many years are as important, if not more important than ever. Not using your mobile phone while driving being another major one. And when I've met a lot of people in relation to this over the last number of weeks, the Medical Road Safety Bureau, the Gardaí, the Road Safety Authority, local authorities, TII, we do need to continue on every opportunity to get that message out about behaviours, driver behaviours, and the impact that has on road safety. And I know you get that. Just in relation to speed limits, I just want to clarify the government's position in relation to this, because in legislation we pass, we do empower the local authorities in relation to final decisions on speed limits, because I do believe in local government, and I do believe that local councillors will always have good and important knowledge that we perhaps won't have here in the Dáil as well. So speed limits and speed limit levels are important, but allowing that understanding at the local authority be preeminent is also quite important too. Now, you are right too. The quality of roads, investment in roads, road repairs, road safety, working with the local authorities is also very important. And it is a sad state of fact that when we see accidents happen on roads, we often see them happen on the same stretch of road or the same bend in a road, what used to be known as the accident black spots, if you think back in the day. And that's why we do want to continue to invest more in relation to safety schemes as well. Now, I have a list here of a number of allocations that we've made to Kerry County Council, including in 2024 allocations received by Kerry, I think 30.14 million million for works to be conducted under various grant types. And under safety schemes specifically, we've provided funding for 5 safety schemes. You may have referenced some of them already. White Bridge, 2 Mile School, Aodhan Village, Castle Gregory Village, Taylor Row and Ardford Village as well. We've also provided funding, €9.7 million in capital funding has been allocated to the protection and renewal of the National Road Network in Kerry. But the specific issues that you've raised today and the specific stretches of road, if you want to provide those details to me in the context of road safety, I'll also ask that the Department of Transport and that the TII look at that and work with Kerry County Council.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Healy-Rae.
Thank you very much, Ceann Comhairle. I would have to say, if the government is serious about saving lives in our roads, then the local authorities will need a massive increase in our funding for road safety schemes. The RSA recently spent €800,000 on one single TV advert for their 30-kilometre town campaign, which in my personal opinion was a glorified tourism advert for the town of Clonakilty. Yet Kerry County Council only received again €550,000 for the entire county to progress road safety schemes in 2024. Schemes that will actually make an impact on our roads. Squandering money on TV adverts that have little or no effect would be far better being spent by the Frank Hartnetts of Ireland in our county councils to effect real changes on our roads. And in my last remaining bit of time, I want to pay a tribute here today to the great soldiers, the people on the ground working for Kerry County Council and indeed all the local authorities throughout the country. The people who are out in bad weather trying to keep our roads clear, filling potholes, doing the tarring, doing the skirting, laying the surface dressing, doing the maintenance work on all of our behalves. And I want to compliment every one of them here today and acknowledge their work in wet weather and in inclement weather.
Taoiseach, to conclude, please.
So look, I'm trying to be agreeable on this because I think you do raise valid and important points about road safety, and we do want to build a political consensus and societal consensus around road safety, which is a major issue. I have a point of difference with you in relation to TV adverts, and I think there's a behavioural science that shows the importance of those impactful ads, and there's probably everybody in this house and anybody watching this at home can think of some of the impactful ads that have been broadcast over the years and the impact that has had in terms of generating conversations around kitchen tables, on the couch, in the workplace, at the water cooler and all of that too. So I think that's good. Look, the point specifically in relation to roads, I would respectfully say the 550,000 obviously refers to 5 specific road projects under the title road safety schemes. The totality of funding that we provide to Kerry in terms of regional and local road networks, and that obviously has a contribution to road safety as well, is around 30.14 million for this year. We've also provided €1 million in current funding to Kerry County Council to fund regular maintenance operations, including winter maintenance and route lighting as well. But let me say this, the last number of months have been horrific in terms of rain. That's had a real impact on roads. I join you in paying tribute to all local authority staff for the work they've done, and I do hope government in the coming days is in a position to recognise the impact that the weather has had on roads and support our local authorities in a practical sense in that way.
Concludes Taoiseach's questions. We go to questions on legislation or policy. Please adhere to the 1 minute allowed. Deputy Mary Lou McDonald first.
Thank you, Ceann Comhairle. I will endeavour to do so, and I want to raise the important issue that affects hundreds of former Waterford Crystal workers. Some of them join us in the public gallery this afternoon, a group that have campaigned on this matter now for years. The workers say that Waterford Crystal Limited failed to properly inform them of their pension options when they were taking redundancy. This left them without an occupational pension and reliant on the state pension. I met with a group of these workers in Waterford recently. They're very angry and they believe, with good reason, that they have never gotten a fair hearing. The workers say the company misinformed them by offering them only one pension option, that was the return of their pension contributions. And by accepting this, workers claim they were unknowingly signing away their pension rights. The workers say they've never received any paperwork whatsoever outlining all of their options. And surely, if proof exists of options being afforded to them, it should be produced, but it has not been. Taoiseach, I'm asking you to intervene in this very serious, ongoing saga. I'm asking you to meet with these workers, hear their case fully, and then have that case fully, independently examined, and give these workers what they deserve, a fair hearing.
Taoiseach.
Thank you, McDonald, for raising this issue. It's one that's been brought to my attention in this House in recent weeks as well by your own colleagues and by colleagues on the government benches too. I am happy to do that. I'm happy for my office to make arrangements in the coming weeks to have that meeting. I'm also happy to ask the Minister for Social Protection to perhaps join me at that meeting as well. Look, I have a note in relation to the issue, but I'm not sure the note captures some of the concerns, quite frankly, that have been expressed by workers here. I want to hear from them directly, and I'm happy to work with you on this matter.
And I want to join in welcoming the Waterford Crystal workers to the gallery and to welcome also, Taoiseach, your commitment to meeting with them. Taoiseach, this week saw more grim news on climate, with the latest projections from the Environmental Protection Agency showing starkly that we are not going to meet our emissions reduction targets, that we have no chance of achieving 51% by 2030, even though this is our legally binding target, and that in a best case scenario, greenhouse gases will only be reduced by 29% by 2030. Friends of the Earth call this alarming and disappointing, and yet we see today a memo reports that a memo was presented to Cabinet by Minister Healy-Rae setting out a list of additional measures that he says could close the gap and that weren't modelled by the EPA, measures that are going to be contained apparently in a revised National Energy and Climate Plan to be published this week. Now, the list of measures sounds somewhat like magical thinking to me, but I would like to know, Taoiseach, will that plan be published this week? Will we have time to debate it in the Dáil? I understand it's to be submitted to the EU Commission next month. And how does your government propose to take the urgent action that is necessary to ensure that we do in fact meet our essential and legally binding emissions reductions targets to avoid what we know is a climate catastrophe?
You,
and thank Deputy Batchik for raising this issue. To the very best of my knowledge, the plan is to publish that plan this week. But let me confirm that, and I am very happy. I think it would be timely, subject to the agreement of the House, to have a debate in relation to climate, perhaps in relation to the EPA report, and indeed the new national plan that the Minister will publish and then will submit to Europe to fulfil our requirements. I would just say this, and I think we'd acknowledge this, there are a number of things, the EPA would acknowledge this also, that they have not yet been in a position to model either actions that are about to start. For example, we yesterday agreed a new national biomethane plan. Some of the changes that are proposed around Dublin City in relation to traffic, the impact of them aren't yet obviously in that 29% figure. Also plans to bring forward a new national adaptation plan. So I'll talk to the Minister for the Environment, seek clarity when the report will be published, and Government happy to have a debate.
Thank you, Deputy Holly Kearns.
Cian Corla, and on the same issue, Taoiseach, the Environmental Protection Agency has stated that even if every measure in the government's climate action plan was implemented, it would only be 29% by 2030, and the legally binding target, as you know, is 51%. So we aren't any closer to meeting our targets than we were 12 months ago. Your colleague Eamon was on the defensive yesterday. He's annoyed that members of the opposition are reading from the EPA report and quoting it accurately. And we all know that the consequences of this failure will be catastrophic, particularly for rural and coastal communities. And it will also expose us to multi-billion euro fines from the EU. Billions of euro, which could be used to actually take climate action, to retrofit homes across the country, to restore biodiversity, to improve water quality, but instead your government are going to throw that opportunity away. So Taoiseach, the biomethane plan is really welcome, genuinely, but it's not going to bring us up to 51%. Have you any plan or intention to reach our legally binding targets?
Thank you, Taoiseach.
Oh, we have every plan and every intention, and as you rightly say, it's a legally binding target, and that's why I think a debate in this House would be timely in relation to that. I would just make one point, because whilst I accept we have a gap to close, I do think if we look at the EPA report, and any fair analysis of it would show that we are now on track to reduce emissions by almost 30%, by 29%. Prior to this government, we were increasing our emissions by 10% a year. So I think, to the credit of sectors of the economy, to credit of society, to credit of the public sector, we are now in a position where we are on track to very significantly reduce emissions. Have we yet? We do have a climate tipping point, and this is not something in the future. We do need to get to 51%. It is our legal requirement to get to 51%, and we will work across this House in relation to that. I do, and I won't have time here. Maybe perhaps during the debate we can come back to some of this. But there are a number of actions that we are taking and proposing to take that will bring that figure beyond the 29-30%, and we're very eager to engage with opposition on how we get to 51.
Deputy Boyd Barrett.
Taoiseach, last week, 40 workers in the New Park School of Music received the absolute shock announcement that that school, which has 600 students in it, is located on New Park School grounds, has been there for 40 years, is to be shut down with a week's notice. Now, Count Corla, I want to thank him, has given us an opportunity for a topical debate tomorrow, but I want to flag this now because these workers' jobs are gone. And this cuts across departments because at a workers' rights level, this is Debenhams Mark II, that would seem to me a flagrant breach of the issue of liquidation. So it needs intervention at that level, the Department of Education level and the arts level, right? This is a non-fee paying school. It's a not-for-profit charity that's on the grounds of New Park. Does outreach, so it's not just their students, but it provides music, teaching, it's self-financing, and now it's just gone. Right, so I'm asking to flag it. There'll probably be some of the people in here tomorrow for the debate, but I want urgent intervention. It just makes no sense that this should happen, and I'm asking for urgent intervention.
Please.
Well, I thank Deputy Boyd Barrett for raising this issue in relation to New Park School of Music. I'm pleased at this time in the Dáil for a topical debate on it tomorrow, and the Deputy being constructive in flagging it with me today. I'll certainly ask in advance of that topical debate for relevant line ministers and agencies to see what role the state may have in this and to be able to give you a comprehensive answer then.
Deputy Lowry.
The fall in number of taxis is having a detrimental impact on towns and villages across rural Ireland. In Tipperary, according to the most recent figures, there has been a drop to just 220 taxis, despite a population growth of over 4,000. This is an obvious negative impact on hospitality and retail services. Pubs and restaurants are struggling as people are forced to stay at home. Securing transport is also a major issue for people who need to get to medical appointments, personal appointments, or in some cases simply to get to their nearest town. Without a local taxi service, many people are left isolated at home or stranded if they leave home. This growing issue was brought to government's attention at the start of this year. There was an agreement to explore the existing prohibitive regulations that deter people from entering the taxi industry, in particular the onerous local knowledge test, which up to 75% of applicants failed. Considering that GPS can direct drivers to given locations, should that regulation be removed?
Thank you, Deputy.
Taoiseach, could I ask you, what is the current position in relation to that review?
Sure.
Thank Deputy Lowry for raising this important issue, and I'll get him a specific answer from Minister Ryan in relation to this. But government is very eager to take steps to increase the number of taxis and hackneys available nationally, and particularly available in rural areas. For a variety of reasons, they don't yield the numbers, so further actions are now planned. Some are already underway. Perhaps I'll write to you in relation to that. But the Minister for Transport has recently written to the Advisory Committee on Taxis and Hackneys to request its consideration of how taxi availability can be assessed and to make recommendations on relevant data. There's a driver recruitment campaign ran on national radio and digital platforms, and there's applications for new vehicle licences can now apply for funding under a variety of schemes as well, but I'll get you an update specifically on the regulation.
Thank you. Taoiseach, Deputy Pringle.
Thank you, Count Corla. Taoiseach, as you can imagine, there are many young constituents in Donegal who go on to study in the north. Given its close proximity to home and given the housing shortage in Dublin at the moment, at the beginning of this year, it was announced that funding would be made available for 25 additional medical students for qualifying students in Queen's from September 2024, and that as part of that arrangement, students will pay the €3,000 fee charged in the Republic, with the state covering the rest of the tuition costs. This is great news for many students looking to study medicine in Donegal and across the country, many of whom will look to come back to the Republic to practice once graduated. I'm asking you, Taoiseach, will you ensure that this project is extended to the rest of the universities in the north, such as Ulster University, to allow more students to study medicine, given the severe lack of GPs and the needs that we have here in the south as well?
Thank you, Taoiseach.
Thanks, Deputy Pringle. Yeah, I think it's a great initiative. I think it's a great initiative for the island of Ireland, for the northwest in particular, for medical education and for opportunities for young people. The Minister for Further and Higher Education is in Ulster University on the Magee campus in Derry today. We are willing to expand this. Obviously, there has to be and I'm not suggesting there's not, but there needs to be two partners and a willingness to do it. But from a funding point of view, we see this as win-win in terms of education, medicine and opportunity for young people.
Thank you. Deputy Gould.
Well, the Taoiseach, a young man, Sean, came into my office last week. He works full-time, he's separated, he has 2 children, he has a good job, he's living with his parents, but he can't afford to buy a house. He has saved every penny he can. He has a substantial amount of savings. He applied for and was accepted to an affordable housing scheme in Cork County Council. With all his savings, a gift from his parents, a good job, a mortgage offer from a bank, he's still €20,000 short. He doesn't qualify for social housing. He can't buy a house. Your government promised that he could buy a house. Your scheme is failing. And we have a situation now where you have a man with 2 children with a good job, good savings, and your policy, affordable housing, is in tatters. Affordable housing that you're providing is not affordable. So I ask you, Taoiseach, what do I tell Sean? What do you tell him? Where does he and his 2 children go? He's in his 30s. Must he live with his parents for the rest of his life?
Thank you, Deputy. Taoiseach.
Well, I'm sure what you definitely don't tell Sean is that if you were in government, you'd get rid of the Help to Buy scheme for first-time buyers and the first home scheme as well. So I'm sure you didn't mention that to Sean. Look, it's very, very hard, Count Corla, on the floor of the Dáil without knowing people's specific financial situations to provide this. This government every week is seeing 500 people buy their first home. Every day is seeing, working day is seeing 350 new homes being built. That's the progress we're making. That's what I'd say to Sean. Increasing supply, increasing supports. There are a range of supports now in place. And if you want to send me Sean's particulars, I'm very happy to come back to you with a more comprehensive reply for his situation.
Thank you, Deputy James O'Connor.
I wish to raise an issue that's very important to people across the North Cork area and Fermoy, Mitchelstown. And unfortunately, I'm meeting a huge number of people who are retired or may have complicated healthcare needs that want to get access to GP services across the North Cork area. Within North Cork, we have now 2 primary care centres, but they seem to be under serious pressure around the lack of GP services. In my own family, my entire family, my siblings all work in the healthcare setting in pharmacy, but they're studying medicine as well. I'm the only one that hasn't done it, but they will tell me as well, and others that I know working in this setting, that they are under fierce pressure to get additional GPs across the North Cork region. I would ask, would the Taoiseach have a conversation about this at Cabinet with the Minister for Health to see if we can get additional resources to help address the needs of access to GP and primary care services in the North Cork area for these people that are so desperately in need.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
Well, thank Deputy O'Connor for raising that important point for his constituents in North Cork in terms of access to GP services. I'll certainly discuss the matter with the Minister for Health and with the HSE. We are now seeing a very significant increase in the number of training places for GPs. We're also now looking at other pathways that we can put in place in universities in terms of that. But I do recognise that in certain parts of the country there may be particular challenges as well, and there is an option available now in terms of having salaried GPs in those areas. So without knowing the particulars, that's definitely one option that is available to the Minister for Health and the HSE. But I'll talk to Minister Donnelly and we'll revert to you on the issue.
Deputy Louise O'Reilly.
Taoiseach, sorry, I'm here for...
Sorry, no, I thought you were here for Deputy Paul Donnelly. No, okay. Deputy Richard Bruton.
I'd like to, first of all, welcome the establishment of the task force to rejuvenate Dublin city centre to make it thriving, attractive and safe. And I know David McRedmond will come up with innovative ideas and it will integrate cross-agency, local authorities, NTA, HSE. The key, I think, Taoiseach, will be that there will be a budget to fund cross-sector, cross-silo initiatives. And I'd be keen that in preparation for the budget that significant monies will be made available to this particular initiative, but also the community safety plans that will be a feature of every community in the country.
Taoiseach.
Yeah, I think thanks to Deputy Bruton for the constructive suggestion, which I agree with. I mean, I'm very clear, and I said this today. I launched the Dublin City Centre Task Force that this is going to come back with a list of practical actions, a list of responsible owners for those actions, and then a requirement for government, both national and local, to fund those initiatives. And certainly, this is something that I'm personally championing, something I'm running from my own department, and therefore something that I intend to deliver funding to deliver in Budget 2025.
Deputy Healy-Rae.
First of all, I want to welcome over 45 women from all over Kerry, especially East Kerry, Barradoove, Headford, Glenflesk and places like Rathmore. These women have created homes and reared fine families, sons and daughters. Many of these sons and daughters now, however, are forced to leave Kerry for places like Australia, Dubai and Canada. 28 to 32-year-olds. They can't afford to purchase a house. And the other sad thing is they won't even be considered for planning permission on a site next door to them owned by the family, or if they could purchase a site from a neighbour. Because of this designation enforced by your planning regulator, empowered by him, which designates areas to be under significant urban influence, and only farmers' sons and daughters can get permission, and that's fine. But there are a whole lot of other people being excluded. And large tracts of land far beyond Killarney, far beyond places like Killarney and Kinmare, are excluded from these people who will build a house themselves, that will create employment, that will spend money. All they want is planning permission. And this designation is hurting the whole lot. I just mentioned one father had 5 Kelleher's musicians. And any one of them can get planning permission. A wonderfully gifted family. They're going to have to leave our shores if we can't hold.
Please, you're out. You're
this is very serious.
I know it's very serious, but keeping the time is very serious here. Resume your seat. Resume your seat. I know you are. I know you. Would you let the Taoiseach answer? Deputy, you're out of order.
I'm sorry.
Well, thank you to Deputy Healy-Rae for raising an important issue and with passion. And I know it is an important issue, and I know planning reform is an important issue too. And everybody on this side of the House, like everybody on that side of the House, wants people to be able to live in this country, wants young people to know that their future's in this country. That's why we are working so hard on housing. It's why we're seeing 350 new homes go to construction every working day. It's why we're seeing 500 people a week now buy their first home. I take the point specifically in relation to planning, and 2 suggestions for the Deputy. We will have the draft National Planning Framework published this June, which will provide an opportunity for people to input on such issues, and the planning bill, which will overhaul planning law, will be in this House again in the month of June too.
Deputy Gino Kenny.
Taoiseach, in the last number of days there's been reports in the media about people having adverse effects in terms of cannabis, and this is obviously quite concerning, but I would argue where there is no regulation, then somebody else will fill that regulation up, and that's the black market. So I think it's in everybody's interest in relation to harm reduction in terms of regulation that there needs to be a different model in terms of cannabis. I would argue that, you know, in the absence of no regulation, the consequences is, you know, people will have adverse effects in terms of cannabis use because of the potency, and you actually don't know what they're consuming. So would you agree with me that we have to change course in terms of the laws around cannabis, and a regulatory system is better than what we have at the moment, where there's no regulation?
Taoiseach.
So I thank Deputy Kenny for raising this issue, and I know he does sincerely raise it on a number of occasions. I think the best way to proceed from a policy point of view in relation to this is the Oireachtas All-Party Committee now that will consider the outcome of the Citizens' Assembly work in relation to drugs. That was a very honest and genuine effort to get civic society together to debate what is a difficult and important issue. There are real health concerns around the use of cannabis, and there are also obviously a need to make sure we support people with addiction as well. So there's a variety of issues that need to be addressed, and I think the new committee is best placed to bring forward its view on the Citizens' Assembly.
Deputy Mark O'Connor.